One thing that I was thinking a lot about, and I was seeing that you were posting about just kind of the impact of the pandemic and how it was changing how
Yep.
businesses and small businesses were reacting and all that kind of stuff. And I think there's been a lot of interesting ways that people have kind of pivoted. And I mean, for example, for one instance in mind, there's a local kind of diner near me that just online order, pay through the phone, go pick it up. Great. Perfect
Right.
experience. I still do it now. So we're
Yep.
still actually, and especially having kids, I think that contributes to that reasoning why. But now I'm like, what a great experience that that small little diner had. And I guess my question for you is, as you kind of are watching the space and how that impact, the pandemic's impact had on these small businesses, what are some of the more interesting shifts in how people are interacting with the businesses in their area, whether it's a diner to service-based businesses? What are some of the things that you think are some of the more interesting shifts in the consumer behavior?
Well, I mean, I think that, consumers have always used the internet to do product and services research before buying. Um, but I think that has been reinforced. People bought more stuff online, more types of things online, and as your diner example illustrates, it's about convenience for them. So I think that more electronic interaction between businesses and consumers. A lot of things might have been handled in the past in a manual way or with paper or with face-to-face visits, and I think more activity is becoming digital. The healthcare field, this is not necessarily small business, but in the healthcare field, there are more virtual doctor visits now. More there were phone consultations in the past, but now what you're getting is more video, like FaceTime video or Zoom or whatever, where people are doing these kinds of um, you know check-ins that probably would have required an office visit in the past. All the payments is another area that's pretty interesting and pretty widespread, that has not gotten as much attention perhaps as it deserves. Early on, Apple Pay and Google Pay weren't that widely adopted. You could, especially, I mean, especially Google Pay, but there were a few chains and grocery stores that were taking it, but not a lot of people were using it. Now, it's the minority who don't take, NFC payments, where you can't pay with your phone. And I haven't seen any recent data to indicate how widely used it is, but just in my anecdotal experience, my little local taqueria that I would go to, they still don't have an app or online ordering, which is a pain in the what. But I go in there and I can pay very quickly. I don't have to use cash. I don't have to pull out a credit card. So sort of contact-free payments is pretty widespread, and that's up and down the line from small businesses to major retailers and department stores. And that's not gotten as much coverage as I would have thought, because it's pretty significant change in behavior. It doesn't necessarily have any marketing implications for small businesses, but in terms of the consumer experience, a lot of these things create expectations that are applied to competitors. So if you have a great, I'll just use Whole Foods because that's one of the grocery stores that I shop at. It's not, again, not a small business category, but it illustrates the larger point. So they have delivery. You can do curbside pickup, or you can go into the store and pay with your phone. And so I've done all of those things, and the convenience of that is really great. And my local Safeway and Lucky supermarkets that are closer to me don't have those capabilities. They do the payment, contact free payments, but not pickup and delivery, not curbside pickup, and no delivery. So if I'm pressed for time, there's no question I'm going to go back to Whole Foods. And so that creates a certain kind of self-reinforcing pattern of loyalty. And the point for small business customers is, when there's a great user experience out in the world, especially in a category that you compete in, people are going to start expecting everybody to have that capability. And it won't be a deal breaker if you've got a great reputation, good reviews, all those things. But it's really important for businesses to understand what's going on in their segment and to try the best they can to make it easy for the customer to do business with them, which may mean adopting some technology that they don't currently have.
The thing that I would, so like one thing I wanted to kind of follow up on what you said is like these expectations that get set now, like you're saying, like these major retailers, or whatever stores are, they're investing in this technology, creating an expectation, and now that expectation can then be applied or is being applied to small business, large business, it doesn't matter. And I think there's a kind of an implication, like if you do adopt this technology, the consumer is going to expect that it works the right way. So as an example, the same diner, we placed an order on a day that they actually were closed. It was a special circumstance that they were closed. They didn't turn off the feature. So we placed the
Oh,
order, we made the payment,
yeah,
and we showed up,
frustrated.
and
Yeah.
no one was there. But again, it's a local diner. I'm not going to get all mad
Yeah,
about it.
you're forgiving, but
For sure.
yeah, it makes the point that you're trying to make. Yeah.
Right. And I think that like the question I have is like, okay, so yeah, you adopt this technology, this service, this feature with interacting with your business, contactless payments, whatever
Right.
it is. What is the potential repercussion in your eyes on having an experience like that or multiple experiences like that?
Well, so I think that's right. It's you raise a very fair point, which is that the other side of this is if it goes wrong, if it doesn't work as expected, if you make, so these technologies sort of make a promise to the consumer, and if they don't work, then there's frustration and potential negative repercussions. That could, if you had been a jerk, you could have written a really negative review on
Yeah,
Yelp
right.
or Google, right?
Yeah.
And even though it would have been an isolated review, still it's not something that the business wants if it can avoid that. So I do think I think, so the caveat is, don't just adopt everything. Nobody's in a position to do that anyway, but don't just indiscriminately just add technology. You have to be thoughtful about it and thoughtful about the customer experience, and um, and do it in a way that's going to work for you and work for the customer. Better to not roll something out if it's going to be the bad version than to to stay with an older process that still mostly works.
So one thing that I think kind of we're kind of touching on is like this idea of technology adoption. And I think that there's all these providers and tools and technologies that you can choose from. And then
Right.
there's this kind of question of, okay, who on our staff at this diner, as just keep using that example,
Yep.
who's gonna manage this? And how are we going to make sure that they're utilizing it in the right way? Another example I have is, I work with, there's a photographer that I work with, and my role in that interaction is actually helping manage their online ordering system, their photography online ordering. So like they create a gallery, they send it out to the client then makes their orders, picks the sizes they want in terms of prints. That whole thing is I'm kind of helping set that up on my end. Do you see that the role of the marketer kind of in today's space has to kind of shift or change? I mean, personally, I feel like I see there's an opportunity in terms of like, hey, this person needs help with that. So I'm going to step in and help with that. But do you think there's a broader kind of trend towards that where maybe marketing groups or teams, especially with small businesses, are kind of being put in positions to where they have to kind of think through how they can help these clients utilize technology, find technology, pick technology, all of that?
So I don't know if I would characterize it as a trend, but definitely services, managed services, or consultation is definitely something that I think people want, and we've seen that in the small business space, and kind of ironically at the other end, at the the global enterprise scale. People want services and want consulting, and so I think that one of the ways to, certainly I think that photographer is very grateful for your willingness and ability to perform that role. And it's very hard to wade through all the competing marketing claims online. If you're looking for a piece of software to do some kind of back office, management of some kind, it's a cumbersome process to evaluate that. And so, if you can go to a trusted person like you and say, hey, do you have a recommendation for this, some SaaS tool that I can use to accomplish this kind of operational task, I think that that's very welcome. and those providers, those companies, those marketers, agencies that are able to go beyond the traditional, I'm going to manage your PPC, or I'm going to set up your Google My Business or your Facebook page or whatever, those traditional functions into the areas of providing, trusted advice, consulting, and then ultimately, managed services in some cases. I think those are, there'll be more loyalty there. There'll be less churn there, but it's not always scalable. I'm sure, your time, for example, is, if you were doing this for 100 clients, it would be very
For sure.
problematic.
For sure.
But certainly they appreciate that.
Yep. So given kind of some of these shifts in like expectations, consumer expectations, what do you think general kind of thought in terms of small businesses and their adoption of technology? Is it like, hey, you better do something is better than nothing? Is it, hey, be thoughtful? Is it, hey, what is in your eyes, given these shifts in behavior, how does the small business kind of adapt, pivot, and adjust to be competitive in the market?
Well, so when apps first came out in whatever it was, 2008 or 9, everybody built an app. And then sometime thereafter, people realized, oh, consumers, no one's going to download my app if I'm a roofing company,
Right.
So I think that analogy holds for certain kinds of technology. I think you certainly need to be present on Google, have a complete Google My Business profile, have a Facebook page, maybe Instagram account, depending on who you are. And you can use these third-party technology tools and platforms where there's very little technical, or limited technical knowledge required to set them up. It's more, it's more about time and sort of knowledge of best practices, which everybody doesn't have. But use those first, because that's where the customer is. Or Yelp, for example. I'm in the process of having to put a roof on my house, which is why I used that example a second ago, because it's top of mind. And I went to Google, I went to Yelp, I looked at some reviews, and Nextdoor also is another one that may be useful for some small businesses. And I got some recommendations. I contacted them. Having the capacity to multiple ways to contact you is very valuable. Email, certainly. Phone for people that want that, and chat messaging is great. So using the existing platforms where your customers are going to look for you in the first place, or do the kinds of searches and lookups that might result in a contact, and then utilizing the tools that make it easy for them on these platforms typically, but also on your website, that make it easy for people to contact you. So some companies have a web form as opposed to an email address. But then beyond that, the thing that really will differentiate businesses is kind of good old-fashioned responsiveness and customer service. Just to use my roofing example again, I went through Yelp and Google and different places and reached out to these people. And I prefer to do it electronically rather than get on the phone and try and get a hold of somebody initially, and then subsequently schedule those appointments. I had three roofing companies come out. The first guy came out and he never got me an estimate. He was the first one, never sent me an estimate. Two others did. They were both responsive. I got it through email, and I was able to make a choice based on that. But the time factor was really critical in getting to the customer. And this is just common sense. A lot of businesses, and then also respond to reviews. This is sort of a version of that. Whoever they are, they're going to have reviews online at this point. And they need to monitor that, and they need to respond to them. And there's a longer discussion about, that's not my customer. Hey, where are all my good reviews?
Right,
that kind of
right.
thing. That's a longer discussion. But
Right.
Look at your reviews, Google, Facebook, Yelp, and if you're in a particular industry, there are going to be sites that have reviews, and respond to those reviews. You probably have to set up an account, but look at them, respond to them, hear what people are saying.
Mhm.
Responsiveness is really a very basic thing, but it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that again, like you introduce, to your point that we talked about earlier, you introduce chat, you introduce all these things. I mean, I don't know how many people I've seen that introduce chat and don't even have the system in place for someone to be responding to those chats.
Well, that's right. That's just another sort of good business common sense thing, is that you don't want to create a channel for your customers and then nobody's there to receive the message, or people don't pay attention. One other quick example. I have an elderly mother. I'm dealing with her doctor. I have to call that office every time, wait on hold for 5, 10, 15 minutes. I can't contact the doctor directly. They have an email address, which is some convoluted, non-intuitive thing, and they never respond to it. And it's just a bad experience all the way around.
Right.
You know, you have to look at your own business through the eyes of your customer, and imagine what it would be like to deal with you if you were the customer, and assess, you know, is it easy to talk to you? How responsive are you being? Is your website terrible? It's just these kinds of basic things.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think like there is like a level of like, so for instance, in the doctor scenario, like I don't think people are as inclined to be like, they didn't respond to my email, I'm finding another doctor. You know what I mean? Like, so
Because you
there's
have to
always,
deal with them.
right. So it's like there's these certain spaces or like industries where you're kind of like subject to whatever their response time is, and you kind of have no choice, which is unfortunate. But it's like in the world where I can order food online on my phone and go pick it up in like 10 minutes, that is very frustrating now when I have this
Yeah.
other industry. So like there's this kind of at odds, but you also have to kind of like, oh well, it's, you know, a doctor.
Well, right. I agree. I mean, this is my mother's doctor, so I especially have no choice in the
Right.
matter.
Right.
But it's an illustration of somebody who really is doing things in a way that used to prevail decades ago and hasn't really modernized, and it's very frustrating. But those are increasingly the marginal cases. I mean, there are situations where you have to deal with their setup regardless of what it is. But more and more, I think people are updating their systems, and so, you know, it's an illustration of the consumer expectations being transferred to another area, and getting really frustrated. Years ago, nobody would have been frustrated by that. That would have just been what you expected.
Right.
You know, rude receptionist,
Yeah.
wait on hold for 10 minutes,
Yeah.
you know.
Doctor will call you back in 3 days.
Yeah, doctor's time is more valuable than yours, that
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, one quick comment about this issue, because there was an article just in the Wall Street Journal a couple of days ago, or maybe it was last week, about how Amazon's next day shipping, you know, very compressed shipping time, had created all these expectations that small businesses were trying to compete with or conform to, and how it's put a lot of pressure on them to do fulfillment really quickly, and which is unfortunate because they obviously don't have the resources that Amazon does. But it's a kind of an inevitable thing where maybe you can get away with a shorter shipping time. I mean, you can't do next day, but maybe you can do something more accelerated. But that's the world we're living in now, you know, and especially when you're dealing with a product supplier, or a product, somebody who sells a product. You know, Amazon is sort of always looming or lurking in the background there, because, you know, so many people use Amazon, and it's the no-brainer default system for so many people. And so you have to do something better. You have to, you know, you can't compensate with technology maybe, but you can compensate with service, you know, overall experience, whatever it is, loyalty.
Like 5 years ago, we had there's all these studies and research,
Yep.
and like it was like some crazy number of small businesses didn't even have a website. And it was probably, I think we kind of looked at it, and it was probably more the home services side, mostly maybe, but regardless, like there was some crazy number of small businesses without a website. Now we're talking about online ordering, you know, pick up in store, pay online, whatever, all this different stuff. You know, if you don't, like, I guess, what would you say if you don't even have a website? What would you be saying to a small business without a website?
Are you saying I, Greg Sterling, don't have a website?
No, if you were talking to
if I'm giving advice to somebody without a website?
Yeah.
Well, to some degree, it depends on whether they're service or product business. But beyond that, I would say, you know, if you have to focus on one thing, you focus on Google. there are a host of businesses for whom social media is really effective.
Yep.
And so it depends. Some people are having enormous success with Instagram, for example, depending on who their audience is and what they're selling. But if you, just generic advice would be, or TikTok in some cases, generic advice would be, if you have a physical location, or if you're a service area business, meaning you go to people's houses, get on Google, fill out and verify your Google My Business profile, complete it, put a bunch of photos on there of your work, whatever's relevant to your business, make sure those photos look relatively good, fill out all the fields. That is really, really important, because in most cases, people are going to look at Google, and that's going to be in their research process, in their buying, in their purchase process. And then you also have to pay attention to reviews, and Google has a way to expedite review solicitation. You can get a link and email it to your customers and say, review us, and that doesn't violate their terms. Bulk mass emailing may, but I don't think that soliciting by itself doesn't. And so be on Google, get some Google reviews, don't pay for them, don't do anything unethical, and then branch out. It really depends though on where your audience is, but Google is the one thing that I think is probably more essential than anything else. Barring you're selling some beauty product and you're an influencer and you could get away with TikTok or without a website.